Hello, it's the 27th of July. Welcome to Renew Every Morning. I'm Paul Anderson-Walsh, and today I'm going to do another of these postcards of grace. Today, maybe a little longer than usual because there's a lot to see in this, and there's a few things I want to pull out for you, and I'm going to do something slightly unusual for us, rather than just for you a pure postcard. I'm actually wanting to go through the text line by line so we can see something, and I may come back to this character again. The character I've got for you is the story of Jairus, the desperate father who believed anyway. And the text I'm going to read from is Luke chapter 8. It comes in Mark's Gospel as well, but it's Luke's account that I'm particularly interested in. And in Luke 8:41, here's what we read. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to the house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying. So you got the scene. Well, I want to pick out for you a really important word in there, and the word I want to pull out is the word implore, because this word it's such a deep word. It literally means to kind of invoke with tears. It's like begging. It's almost as if you can imagine someone throwing themselves prostrate on the floor and just crying and weeping. It carries an intensity to it. And when Jairus implored Jesus to come into his home, this is just the most heartfelt appeal you could ever imagine. This is a plea born out of utter desperation, as indeed it might be if your daughter is dying. Can you imagine? So the Greek word here is to call, to beg, to urge, and it comes from this. The idea here is it kind of how shall I say? The thing I wanted just to pull on this is that it's about invoking something. It's an invocation. And I think it's quite interesting to notice the distinction between to invoke something versus to evoke something. And here, this is about calling upon. This is an active summoning for help. Whereas if you were evoking, you'd be kind of calling out and triggering a memory or a feeling. And part of me is wondering to myself whether or not there is a kind of advanced state which is a combination, which perhaps is the condition of the miraculous, of invoking and evoking. I wonder if those things fuse together. But anyway, here's the point. As Jesus went, people pressed in him, and they all were pressing in on him. You can just imagine the crowds. And there was a woman in this crowd, and she had a discharge of blood, and she had it for 12 years. So please note that, right? You've got a young girl who is 12 years of age, who is dying. You've got a woman who for 12 years has had this issue of blood that won't stop. It's just constantly for 12 years. And though she spent all her living on the physicians, she could not be healed by anybody. And she came up behind Jesus. So watch this. She works her way through the crowd, and she just touches the fringe of his garment, and immediately the discharge of blood was cleansed. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" And they all denied it. And Peter said, "Master, the crowds are surrounding you. There's loads of people pressing you. No one's touched you in that way." And Jesus said, "No, somebody touched me." And listen to what he says. "For I perceive that the power has come out from me, or gone out from me." Did you hear that? That is a powerful idea. Somebody has touched me. I know it because I know the power has gone out from me. You see, this is because power is a divine flow, not a possession. Jesus isn't a magician controlling power. He's a channel of divine flow, and his awareness that the power has flowed out from him, it just tells you how attuned he is to the body of grace. Now, Gregory of Nyssa, he said the power flowed through him because he was utterly open to God. So now just hear that. The power was able to flow through from him, and he recognized that it had left him because he's so utterly open to God. And I wonder if that's not the criteria for the healing ministry, that the power of God can flow through you because you're just open to him. The touch didn't surprise him, didn't threaten him, but it kind of almost like awakened that divine intimacy, that someone had touched him with faith, and because of that had touched the eternal. You see, faith awakens the divine circuit, and the idea here is this is not just a kind of a physical healing. It's almost like a relational electricity that's sprung into effect. And the woman's faith literally activates that spiritual circuit. It's absolutely extraordinary. And so here we see it then. And this is a lovely embodiment, if you like, of awareness and energy. And Jesus knows what he's carrying. It's really, really important. He knows that very well. And this is also about recognizing that Christ's consciousness is inherently generous as well. The idea of this kind of scarcity mindset is really challenged here. And it's worth just thinking about that. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Because Jesus doesn't ration out miracles, not at all. The power just flows freely when drawn upon with faith, and this is going to be something that's going to become important to Jairus, as you're going to see in a minute. The other thing to say is there's no diminishment in God, so he gives when he gives, he only increases the soul that receives it. His supply isn't diminished, your supply is increased, and that's the thing. And so now we kind of get into this really interesting space with Jesus. So if you like, there's a few themes that I just wanted to touch on before I deal with Jairus. One is the theme of power. So that's the idea of it flowing and the idea of divine life moving through openness. Second is about faith, which creates that divine connection, that touch that activates the grace. Then there's this idea of body and spirit. There's no divide with Jesus. It's entirely congruent. Then there's something about awareness, that this deeper understanding that Jesus has. And then there's this notion of abundance, that grace flows as an infinite supply. And verse 47 says, and when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before he declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she'd been immediately healed. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well, go in peace. Now, she's broken protocol, she's broken tradition, she's broken with everything. But desperate people don't care. Now, what do you think might be going on in the mind of Jairus right now? She took this healing and she literally came and snatched it, grabbed it, and he, by contrast, she took it and was healed. Now, he, by contrast, may be thinking to himself, well, I'm a person of status, and I implored Jesus, I threw myself prostrate on the floor and begged him. So if this woman has been given the blessing, maybe he must give it to me as well. But then maybe he thought to himself as well, but what if she's taken all the blessing? And now watch what happens in verse 49. In verse 49, while he was still speaking, somebody from the ruler's house came and said, your daughter's dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore. Now what do you think Jairus is thinking to himself? Oh my goodness, I imagine Jairus was plunged into utter darkness. And this is important because it's not now requiring him to make a leap of faith. He may well be thinking to himself, I cannot believe it. If she hadn't held him up, we hadn't all this kerfuffle, I could have got him into the house, my daughter would have been healed and we'd have all been good. But Jesus just speaks life into the situation by saying this, do not fear, only believe, and she'll be well. Now, there's nothing else said now, except the next verse we move to just says, and when they came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him, except Peter, John, and James, and the father and the mother of the child. Nobody else can be there. So the father and the mother, clearly no one can bring more love to this situation than those two. But he brings the inner circle. So we're not going to have any noise, we're not going to have any cameras, no one's going to record it on Facebook, no one's going to put it on social media, we're not going to have people in there crying and wailing, we don't have any of that. We're just going to have these people in. Now bear in mind, it's interesting to note, right, because these three are also the three that are at the transfiguration. So there's a very interesting thing for us to think about. And I want you to notice in Luke chapter 8, there's this really quick procession of miracles. So in Luke 8:22, what happens is he calms the storm. So remember, Jesus has the power over all of the external chaos. Then he heals the Gadarene demoniac. Do you remember that story, with the demoniac is cured? And he has this incredible, this power over all of the internal turmoil. And then he raises Jairus' daughter from the dead. Now, this woman is and of course, in between that time, there's a woman that's healed by just touching his garment. So remember that. So there's a really interesting pattern of power that's being built up here. And of course, After that, he sends out the 12 and gives them the authority to do it. Then he feeds the 5,000. Then Peter makes his confession, and then they go to the transfiguration. And so it's very important to see how these things are stepping up. So just watch for that. So a couple of things to say before we just jump into the rest of the story. Number one, and I think this is worth saying, faith draws power. With the woman of the issue of blood. Desperation is not a disqualifier, Jairus' story. The disciples, interestingly, moved from being spectators to agents, which is interesting. And what you see here is that scarcity that is concerning us here in this part of the passage is turned into generosity at the feeding of the 5,000. Now, all right, so let's jump on. So verse 52, and all the women were weeping and they were mourning for her. But he said, don't weep. She's not dead. She's asleep. And they laughed and said, what are you talking about? We know she's dead. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, child, arise. And her spirit returned, and she got up at once, and she directed that something be given to her to eat. And the parents were amazed. But he charged them to tell no one what had happened. Well, now, let me just give you a couple of thoughts here as we wrap this up. What I held back today was the meaning of Jairus' name. Jairus' name means he will enlighten, or it means light diffused. And listen to this, grace upon grace, doesn't it do exactly that? He will enlighten. And now in the Jairus household, light has been diffused through the resurrection. Now that is to me just astonishing. He's this man of great standing and all the rest of it, but what we really see there is precious. And I just wanted to come back to the interesting thing about the daughter. So the woman with the issue of blood had the issue for 12 years. Jairus' daughter was 12 years old. Now, that means that the woman was, her issue of blood was a result of her womanhood. The child is 12 and she's coming into her womanhood. She's approaching her bat mitzvah, the moment where a Jewish girl is spiritually seen as mature. The very moment that life should begin, life is taken away from her. Death was going to have the last word. But that is never going to be the case, because Jesus is in the town. And that is, for me, seems to be just very, very powerful. This was the absolute perfect example of revelation. She touched the hem of the garment, and the issue of the blood stopped. Jesus spoke to her, and the blood pumped. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable. That's how grace works. So let me finish by saying this. Where you will hear the whispers of scarcity, when scarcity says there's not enough to go round and someone else has taken yours, that Darwinian logic of the survival of the fittest, no, forget all about that. Forget that. You didn't get there too late. It hasn't all gone. My grace is sufficient for you. Jesus isn't depleted. Never. Power doesn't drain him. Never. Love doesn't reduce. Every time he loves, it multiplies. Grace isn't like a pie that you divide and there's none left. He's a well that never, ever, ever runs dry. The healing of one doesn't cancel the healing of another. The breakthrough for someone else doesn't cancel your breakthrough. Never. When God gives, he's never diminished by what he's already given away. There's always more. There's always more. There's always more. And when then think of something just unthinkable. I mean, just imagine this. Someone from Jairus' household arrives and says, your daughter's dead, don't bother the master anymore. My God, you're at the crossroad of fear and faith. And Jesus steps in before Jairus can declare his fear, before he can turn back, before he can walk away. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid any longer. Just believe, and she will be made well. Well, may you be encouraged today, because the world may laugh, the world may mock, they may tell you that your dreams are dead and everything is over. But not everybody understands the language of resurrection. Jairus stayed when he might have gone. And Jesus takes her by the hand and says, child, arise, and she does. The Spirit returned to her. Life re-enters. Grace diffuses life into death. Be encouraged. Be encouraged, be encouraged, be encouraged. And may you, as you walk today, you know very well that you too are a diffuser of life. May you be renewed. See you next time. See you tomorrow, I hope. Bye-bye.